So on Sunday, we looked at a passage in John 14 where Jesus is talking to some of his disciples. People have wondered, is this a passage that leads towards something like universalism? And there's a couple different ways we can think about that word. The first is to think about religious universalism, which is the idea that all religions, regardless of what they believe or think, ultimately are all about some kind of goodness and love, and they all get you to God anyway. That doesn't really square up with what Jesus is talking about because he calls himself way and himself truth. Second way is to think of Christian universalism. This is the idea that because of Jesus and what he's done, all people will eventually be brought into right relationship with God. And that's an interesting idea, but it's tough to square as well because later in the chapter, Jesus talks about those who don't love him and don't obey him or follow him. There's another way to think about universalism that sometimes we call hopeful universalism, which is the idea that grace is available to us always. So it doesn't end the moment you're hit by a bus, but you still have to accept it. You still have to embrace the story of Jesus. It's just that you have all of eternity to do that. And if eternity is the time scale, then we could hope at least that eventually everyone would come to know God as Savior and friend. That is an interesting idea, but there's really not much in this passage to make sense of it for, and so we kind of have to leave that aside. And so the last idea would be this, not so much universalism, but maybe a Christian inclusivism. And this is where I think we can square Jesus' words in John 14 up with Jesus' words in the Great Commission, where he tells us to go, preach the gospel, make disciples of all people. You see, Jesus says, listen, your job is to go out and tell the story. Your job is to invite people into relationship with me. But at the end of the day, I reserve the right for myself to show up when and where and how I choose, even if it's not through your preaching. And this is what it comes down to for me. My experience of God is so important and so powerful to me that I want to do everything I can to invite the people around me to experience God in that way. And yet, I also understand that God reserves the right to show up in all kinds of ways that I might not understand or expect. And this is really, I think, what Jesus is getting at. Yes, we're meant to tell his story. Yes, we are meant to go out there and invite people to know him as best we can. And yet, we may one day be surprised to find that Jesus has been at work in the world in all kinds of ways and places and people that we never expected.